In a shocking story, the New York Times reported last week that Israeli agents assassinated al-Qaeda's second-in-command in Tehran, Iran, back in August of this year. Apparently, it was done under the behest of the United States, and the AP actually came out earlier on Sunday saying that, in fact, the United States was heavily involved. Sam, what have you heard about this story?
Yeah, that was interesting. A story that came out last week. Today, AP suggested that it was American intelligence officers that basically told Israeli agents that Mohammed al-Masri, if I'm not mistaken, was residing in Iran in a relatively, high-end area, post-Tehran area. He was murdered with silencers. It's kind of like a movie plot, but apparently they came next to his car with a motorcycle and they shot him and his daughter. They both died in this incident, and this happened actually or during the same time that was uh, explosions happening in Iranian nuclear facilities that were uh, largely connected to Israeli agents in Iran. Um, and This is quite interesting because the day that he was assassinated as well was the anniversary of attacks on US governmental buildings in Nairobi and Dar al-Islam. It's important to mention the fact that Iranian officials have denied any Al-Qaeda member is residing in Iran, and they have described this news report as a part of a psychological warfare by United States and Israel. However, there are reports by the local people and stuff that seems to confirm that two Lebanese nationals were killed in Iran on that day, and there are no records of those Lebanese citizens in Lebanon. So it seems that those two people were actually Mohammed Masri and his daughter. And by the way, it's important to mention that uh, he was not really so much of a religious type. He was more sort of an American resistance in Northern Africa type, from a Muslim Brotherhood type of figure. And uh, his daughter was married to one of bin Laden's sons, who was killed last year on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, I believe. And it's a very interesting story that kind of reminds you of old spy movies in many ways. But that's about it, to be honest, right now.
But Sam, what do you think one of Al Qaeda's senior figures would be doing in Iran if in fact he was in Iran? Everybody knows that Iran and Al Qaeda, contrary to what you hear sometimes in Western news report, they're major enemies. Iran has been at war with Al Qaeda for the past 20 years. So what would such a person so high up be doing in Tehran?
That's definitely true. No, to be honest, I would assume he was in Iran as a sort of a hostage against Al Qaeda to prevent any Al Qaeda attack within Iran. Not to mention the fact that Iran, just like any other state, probably cooperates with these groups against the common enemy, which would be America in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Israel and Palestine. So, I mean, Iran is generally portrayed as this irrational actor in international politics, but in fact, if you look at their actions, they are extremely rational, and they've managed to cooperate with long-standing enemies um, when it serves a national interest or country's interest. So I would assume he was here because I don't think he was so much involved in operations anymore if he was residing in Iran for a long time. And because, to be honest, he was a very old man in many, he was from a old guard, which was pretty much replaced. So I think it was more of a hostage sort of situation in, hostage taking, sort of guarantee that Al Qaeda does not do any activities in Iran. Not that, to be honest, they can, because they don't have much of a base in Iran. But that's the main assumption, that he was a hostage and he was helping to coordinate attacks against common enemies, US and Israel.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And so, what do you think this assassination means for the region's security?
Yeah, well, if it is true that he was here as a guarantor of sort of against Al-Qaeda activity in Iran potentially could mean more Al-Qaeda activity in Iran. I find that highly doubtful, to be honest. As I mentioned, they don't really have any base in Iran, any popular base in Iran. And just last week, Iran managed to arrest the leader of a separatist Arab separatist movement in Turkey. They arrested him and brought him back to Iran. He was interrogated. His interrogations was broadcast on TV. So in terms of security, Iran seems to be doing okay, but it is a sign of perhaps in the last few months of Trump, there are talks of escalating activities of Israeli and American intelligence officers in Iran, trying to get as much done as possible before Biden administration potentially reduces tensions, reduces animosity.
Okay, Sam, so thank you very much for the insights. If you like this video and this kind of content, please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.